If you enjoy my videos, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps my channel grow and I will make more good videos for you. The lobby of the Sterling Grand Hotel shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Guests moved like dancers across polished marble, their shoes clicking in rhythm with the soft classical music floating through the air. It was a world Mei Lin had learned to pass through invisibly. Her cleaning cart rolled quietly, her eyes always down, her presence never lingering. She was used to being a shadow. The uniform she wore was neat but simple. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail and she never wore makeup. Mei Lin's job was to clean, not be seen. She was one of many who worked behind the scenes, making the world beautiful for those who never noticed the hands that made it so. It was just after 8 p.m. when her shift took her to the top floor, the penthouse level. That was where the VIPs stayed, the kind of people who lived in penthouses not just in hotels but in life. CEOs, royals, movie stars. She had cleaned those rooms many times, but always with care and always with silence. Her phone buzzed in her pocket and her heart jumped. She was not supposed to have it on during work hours. But this wasn't a normal call. It was from her mother. Mei Lin glanced down the hallway. The suites were quiet. Most guests went out in the evenings, dinners, events, business meetings. She stepped into the service alcove between the door of Suite 1701 and the supply closet. She pulled out her phone and answered softly. "Hello?" "Mom," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. The voice on the other end was familiar and urgent. Her mother had called to remind her about a document that needed to be sent to the immigration office. Mei Lin reassured her in fluent melodic Mandarin, her tone switching between concern and comfort. She didn't notice that the door to Suite 1701 had opened slightly. Alexander Reed stood inside. He had just ended a call of his own. Something about numbers in Singapore not aligning. His mind had been racing, calculating margins and forecasts. But then he heard her voice. Soft. Controlled. Musical. He hadn't understood the words, but he didn't need to. It was the confidence. The fluency. The way the foreign syllables came from someone he'd seen earlier that day in a cleaning uniform, bowing her head while changing the linens on the lower floors. When she ended the call and turned, her cheeks flushed as she caught sight of him. The phone slipped quickly back into her pocket. Sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to disturb." He said nothing. Just looked at her with those piercing gray eyes. Cool, unreadable. Then, without a word, he closed the door again. Mei Lin stood frozen for a moment. Her heart thudded in her chest. She'd been seen. Worse, overheard. She prayed he wouldn't report her. She needed this job. Her family needed the money. The rest of her shift blurred. She cleaned on autopilot, her mind spinning with worry. By the time she clocked out and stepped into the cold New York night, the memory of those gray eyes haunted her more than the winter wind. The morning came too fast. She arrived at the hotel just before sunrise. Like every day, she tied her apron, grabbed her cart, and made her way to the employee locker area. But before she could begin her rounds, her supervisor intercepted her. "The manager wants to see you," he said, avoiding her eyes. Mei Lin's stomach dropped. She followed the long hallway to the manager's office. Her thoughts raced. Was she being fired? Had Alexander Reed complained about her? She knocked quietly and stepped inside. Mr. Bennett, the hotel manager, looked up from his desk. He was usually too busy to speak to the cleaning staff directly. "Mei Lin," he said, folding his hands. "You've been requested for special service." She blinked. "Requested?" He nodded. "Mr. Alexander Reed, Suite 1701. He asked for you by name." Her heart skipped a beat. She tried to hide the confusion on her face. Mr. Bennett continued. "He didn't say why. But when a guest of his status makes a request, we honor it. You'll be working his suite exclusively today. Don't be late." And whatever you did yesterday, do it again. She left the office in a daze. The hallway to the penthouse floor felt longer this time. Her legs were heavy, her palms sweaty. What did he want with her? Why her? She knocked softly on the door of 1701. It opened almost instantly. Alexander stood there. Sharp suit, no tie. His hair slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked at her with the same unreadable expression. "Come in," he said. Mei Lin hesitated, then stepped inside. The suite was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Manhattan skyline. The early light bathed everything in a golden glow. The air smelled like leather and cedar. "Would you like me to start with the bedroom or the living room?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to the armchair by the window. "Sit," he said. She froze. "I'm sorry, sir, I'm not supposed." "I asked," he interrupted, "not ordered." She hesitated, then slowly sat down. He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, watching her. "You speak Mandarin," he said finally. She nodded. "Yes, fluently. My parents are from Guangdong. I grew up speaking it at home." He studied her face. "You don't talk much, do you?" Mei Lin shook her head, unsure if that was a good or bad thing. "That's interesting," he said. "Because when you were on the phone, you weren't shy at all. You sounded confident." She didn't know how to answer that. It was true. Her mother's voice brought out a different side of her. "I was just talking to my mom," she said quietly. "She worries a lot." He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "Do you know who I am?" "Alexander Reed," she said. "You're the CEO of Redwell Technologies. You've been in Forbes 3 times this year." His eyebrow raised slightly. "You keep track of tech billionaires?" "No," she said, flushing. "Your picture was on the staff bulletin board. The hotel briefed us when you checked in." He nodded, almost amused. Then came the silence again. A long, heavy pause. Finally, he said, "Would you like a different job?" Mei Lin's mouth parted, confused. "What do you mean?" He stood up and walked to the window. "I need a translator. Someone fluent in Mandarin. Discreet. Observant. You ticked all those boxes last night without even trying." Her breath caught in her throat. I'm not qualified," she said quickly. "I clean hotel rooms. I didn't finish college." I didn't ask for a resume," he said, turning toward her. "I asked if you're interested." She didn't know what to say. Her whole body trembled, not with fear, but something else. A door had opened where she never expected one. But doors like that, they didn't open for girls like her. "Why me?" she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I trust quiet people," he said. "They listen more than they speak. And I need someone who knows when to speak and when not to." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. "We'll be heading to Shanghai in 3 days. Think about it. I'll have a contract ready if you're interested." And just like that, he walked back into the bedroom, leaving her sitting in silence. Mei Lin sat still for a long time, her mind spinning faster than it ever had. She had cleaned 100 suites, changed 1,000 sheets. She'd watched the world pass by from behind glass walls and housekeeping carts. But now someone powerful, had seen her. The door hadn't just opened. It had been unlocked by the last person she ever expected. The morning sky above Manhattan was a soft, misty gray. Clouds hung low, almost touching the rooftops, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Inside the Sterling Grand Hotel, everything moved with quiet urgency. Staff whispered into radios, suitcases rolled across the floor, and the faint clink of silverware from the breakfast hall floated through the marble corridors. Mei Lin stood outside the manager's office again, just like yesterday. But this time her heart beat even faster. She clutched the handle of her cleaning cart with both hands, though she hadn't needed it this morning. She had barely slept the night before. Her thoughts kept circling around Alexander Reed's strange request. A translator? Her? The door opened and Mr. Bennet waved her inside. He looked more serious than usual. "Mr. Reed spoke with me this morning," he said. "He insists you assist him today. Not for cleaning. For interpreting." Mei Lin swallowed hard. "I've never done that before, sir." Mr. Bennet sighed. "I told him that. He doesn't care. He said you'll pick it up." She felt a tight knot forming in her chest. "You're not in trouble," the manager added, softening a little. "In fact, this could be a big opportunity. But it's your decision." Mei Lin looked down at her shoes. Her fingers trembled slightly. This wasn't her world. She was used to silence, to small spaces, to staying out of the way. Stepping into a meeting room full of investors in suits felt impossible. Still, something inside her stirred. A small, distant memory. Her father once telling her that every locked door has a key and sometimes you are the key. She nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll try." Mr. Bennet gave her a brief smile and told her to meet Alexander upstairs. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual. When she reached the top floor, the door to Suite 1701 opened before she could knock. Alexander Reed stood there in a tailored navy suit, phone pressed to his ear. He waved her in without speaking and pointed to a seat by the window. She sat down quietly. He ended the call a moment later. "You came," he said, almost as if it surprised him. "Ah, yes. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this," she admitted, her voice soft. He looked at her for a long moment, then poured 2 glasses of water. He handed her one and sat across from her. "Do you know why I asked you?" he asked. Mei Lin shook her head. "Because when people are forced into rooms they're not used to, you can see who they really are. Most fake confidence. Some collapse. But a few surprise you." She blinked, unsure what to say. He continued, his voice calmer than she'd expected. "Today's meeting is low-key. Just a few investors. One of them is from Beijing. Doesn't speak English. Our usual translator is stuck in traffic, and frankly, I wanted to see how you handle it." "I'm not trained," she said. "No," he said. "But I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be useful." His words weren't kind in the usual sense, but there was no harshness in them either. They were honest. Straight. A soft knock on the suite's other door interrupted them. "That's my assistant," Alexander said. "Time to go." She stood up, nerves buzzing like electricity under her skin. They walked together through the hallway and into the executive conference room on the same floor. The room had glass walls and a long table surrounded by tall-backed chairs. Several men in suits were already seated. Laptops were open, coffee steaming in porcelain cups. Alexander took his seat at the head of the table. He motioned for Mei Lin to stand beside him. She felt the eyes of the room on her. One of the men, older and dressed in a long dark coat, glanced at her and paused. His gaze lingered, and Mei Lin felt a flicker of something, recognition. She quickly looked away. The meeting began. Alexander introduced everyone in English, his voice firm and confident. When it came time to speak to the man from Beijing, he turned to Mei Lin. She took a small breath and translated. Her voice was clear, her Mandarin smooth. She kept her tone professional, her expressions polite. The words flowed from English to Chinese and back again like a quiet stream. She didn't stumble. She didn't rush. She translated numbers, terms, business details. She even adjusted her voice slightly to match each speaker's tone. By the halfway point of the meeting, the room had forgotten she was new to this. They spoke normally, trusting her to carry their words across the language barrier. Even Alexander seemed impressed. His gray eyes flicked toward her every few minutes, nodding almost without realizing it. The man from Beijing watched her closely. When the meeting ended, people began to rise, shaking hands, closing laptops. Alexander was pulled aside by one of his partners, and Mei Lin stood quietly near the window, unsure if she should leave. The older man approached her. His face was worn but kind, with deep lines around his eyes. He spoke in Mandarin. "You're from Guangzhou?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied politely. "Your accent," he said slowly. "It reminds me of someone I knew long ago." Mei Lin tilted her head. "My parents are from there." "What are their names?" She hesitated. "Lin Yong and Wei Hua." He blinked. His expression shifted. "Lin Yong. He studied medicine, yes?" Mei Lin's eyes widened slightly. "Yes. Before we moved to the U.S., he was a village doctor." The man gave a soft chuckle. "He once treated my son when we visited the countryside. I remember his daughter, very small, always carrying a red notebook." Her throat tightened. She still remembered that notebook. She had drawn in it every day while sitting in her father's clinic. "I am that daughter," she said quietly. He gave her a long, thoughtful look. "The world is smaller than we think." Alexander returned then, noticing the two speaking. The older man turned to him and said something brief in Mandarin before offering Mei Lin a respectful nod and walking away. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What did he say?" Mei Lin swallowed. "He knew my father. From a long time ago." Alexander didn't press. But he looked at her differently now. Not just with curiosity, but with something close to respect. He walked her back to his suite without saying much. When they reached the door, he paused. "You were better than expected," he said. She lowered her eyes. "Thank you." "You're not going back to cleaning rooms," he added. "Not after this." She looked up, surprised. "I'm not. I've arranged for you to work with my team for the rest of the week," he said. "You'll be on payroll as a freelance interpreter. My assistant will handle the paperwork." Mei Lin couldn't find words. He opened the door, then stopped again. "One more thing. That man from Beijing? He's not just an investor. He owns a company I've been trying to partner with for 2 years. Today was the first time he stayed for a full meeting. You're part of the reason." Her chest rose with a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. When the door closed, she leaned against the wall for a moment, letting it all sink in. In one day, everything had changed. Not because she had chased it, but because she had answered a call. Literally. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. Far away down the hallway, the older man from Beijing stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, he looked thoughtful. He whispered her name once, almost to himself, like he was remembering something very old and very important. The sun was just beginning to peek through the tall buildings of Manhattan, casting long shadows across the lobby floor of the Sterling Grand Hotel. Mei Lin walked through the quiet hallways, her thoughts still circling the events of the day before. She had translated for powerful men, had impressed a CEO, and had spoken to someone who remembered her father from a different life, one that felt so distant now it might have been a dream. She still couldn't believe she had done it. But her life was changing, one step at a time, and there was no turning back now. She wore a simple cream blouse tucked into dark slacks, clothes lent to her by the hotel staff after Alexander's assistant insisted she dress the part. Her cleaning uniform was folded neatly in her locker, untouched. When she stepped into the elevator that morning to meet Alexander again, she was no longer just a cleaner. She didn't quite know what she was now, but it was something different, something more. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, and she found Alexander waiting by the glass wall of the penthouse suite. He was looking out at the city, his hands in his pockets. He turned when he heard her footsteps and gave her a brief nod. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied softly. He studied her face for a moment, then gestured for her to sit. I hope you're not too tired. She shook her head. I'm okay. I wanted to thank you again for yesterday, he said. The investor from Beijing emailed me this morning. He mentioned you. Said your presence reminded him of someone. Mei Lin looked down at her hands. He knew my father. Alexander tilted his head. Really? How? She hesitated. Then slowly she spoke. My father was a professor in Guangzhou. He taught philosophy at the university. My mother was a pianist. She performed with orchestras across China. We lived in a large house near the lake. It was peaceful, happy. Alexander didn't interrupt. He leaned forward slightly, listening. My father was well respected, she continued. People came from other provinces to hear him speak. My mother used to hold small concerts at our home. Students, neighbors, even foreign diplomats would attend. I used to sit under the piano and listen while she played. Her voice grew softer as memories floated back like old photographs. But one year, she said, everything changed. My father published a paper that questioned a few government policies. He didn't mean to offend anyone, but it was enough. The university removed him. Friends stopped visiting. My mother lost her position at the conservatory. We were watched. Followed. One night our house was searched. My father told us we had to leave. She paused, trying to steady her voice. We came to New York with 2 suitcases and no money. My mother never played again. My father found work as a cashier. I cleaned houses after school. Alexander's face was unreadable, but his eyes had changed. They were softer now, more curious. You speak like someone educated, he said. My parents taught me, she said simply. They never stopped teaching, even after everything. He nodded slowly. You were raised among books and music. That's why you speak like you do. Why you carry yourself differently. Mei Lin felt a strange warmth in her chest. No one had ever noticed that before. Most people saw only her hotel uniform. Alexander stood and walked to the bar, pouring himself a coffee. He glanced back at her. How much do you know about cultural diplomacy? He asked suddenly. She blinked. Not much. Why? I'm working on a new deal with a Chinese company, he said. It's delicate. Their founder is traditional, prefers to work with people who understand more than just business. They care about presentation, tone, values. I need someone who understands both worlds. You want me to help? I want to offer you a temporary position. Cultural advisor. 2 weeks, maybe more if it works out. You'd work closely with my team. You'd attend meetings, help prepare documents, coach us on etiquette. She stared at him, stunned. But I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than you think, he said. I don't need someone with a degree. I need someone with insight. You've lived in both worlds. That's rare. Mei Lin's heart pounded. Felt unreal. Just days ago, she had been scrubbing bathroom floors. Now this man, this powerful, distant man, was offering her a seat at his table. I'll give you time to think about it, he added. But don't wait too long. She nodded, barely able to speak. That evening, she walked home through the busy streets of Chinatown. The noise, the lights, the smells of roasted duck and garlic noodles, everything felt sharper, more alive. She stopped by the small market where her mother worked and waved through the window. Her mother looked up and smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. At home, she sat by the window and looked at the sky. Past still lived inside her, like a song she hadn't played in years. She remembered the way her mother's fingers moved over the piano keys. She remembered her father's voice reading aloud from old books, his eyes lit with passion. For so long, she had buried those memories. She thought they had no place in her new life. But now, for the first time, her past wasn't something to hide. It was the reason she had value. The next morning, she arrived at the penthouse with a small notebook in hand. Alexander was already there, speaking on the phone. When he saw her, he ended the call. "I've made my decision," Mei Lin said. He raised an eyebrow. "Yes, I'll take the job." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good." He handed her a tablet with schedules and notes. "We have a meeting with the Beijing group in 3 days. I want you to help my team prepare. You'll meet with each department head. Tell them what to avoid, what to focus on." She nodded, already flipping through the pages. As the day went on, she met with staff from marketing, design, and legal. She explained the importance of subtle colors, of saving face, of using the right titles and forms of address. She corrected the tone of the welcome message and adjusted the images in the presentation slides. Everyone listened. That evening, as the office lights dimmed and most of the staff left for the day, Alexander walked into the small conference room where she sat reviewing notes. He sat across from her without a word and watched her for a moment. "You know," he said, "I never ask people personal questions. It's a rule I keep." She looked up, curious. "But with you," he said slowly, "I want to understand." She didn't speak. She waited. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" he asked. "About your past?" She thought for a moment. "Because it didn't matter. Not here. In this world, people see who you are now, not who you used to be." Alexander nodded. "And yet, who you used to be explains everything." Mei Lin closed the notebook and smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm still becoming who I'm supposed to be." He studied her face, something quiet and thoughtful in his expression. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowned slightly, and stood up. "I need to take this," he said. "But there's something else we need to discuss. Tomorrow." She tilted her head. "What is it?" He paused at the door. "It's about the Beijing founder. He asked if you'd be attending the dinner next week." She looked surprised. "Me?" Alexander met her eyes. "Yes. He requested you by name." As he stepped out, Mei Lin stared after him, her heart full of questions. She hadn't spoken to the man more than once. And yet, something in their brief exchange had stirred a memory in him. A memory that now seemed to be pulling her further into a story she had tried to forget. As the office lights dimmed completely, Mei Lin sat alone in the quiet room, notebook in hand. Her new life was beginning. But her old life was not done with her yet. The first day Mei Lin stepped into Alexander Reed's main office, she felt like she had walked into a different universe. Everything was polished, fast, and quietly powerful. Glass walls, sleek furniture, and people who spoke with precision and purpose. It was nothing like the hotel's laundry room or the cleaning carts she used to push. Her new desk sat just outside Alexander's own office, close enough to hear his voice when he was on the phone, far enough to feel the distance that still lingered between their worlds. But every day that distance seemed to shrink. She was quiet, efficient, and careful. She read every document she was given twice and took notes in her small notebook with neat, careful strokes. The staff noticed. The head of PR stopped her one afternoon just to say her corrections to the Beijing press release had prevented an embarrassing mistake. The legal advisor thanked her for her insight during a contract review. Something about her tone made a complex clause more acceptable to the Chinese partners. Even the team members who'd initially dismissed her as just the translator now nodded respectfully when they passed her desk. But the one who noticed most was Alexander. He began to check in with her more often. Not just about work, though there was plenty of that, but also about her thoughts. What she believed a certain gesture meant. How a sentence might be received. He would glance at her after long meetings, silently checking her expression for unspoken cues. She didn't always have the answers, but when she did, he listened. Truly listened. Sometimes she caught him watching her, Not with cold judgment, but with quiet curiosity. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to finish. She found herself watching him, too. When he walked into a room, everything shifted. People leaned forward. The room quieted. His presence was sharp and confident, but never loud. And yet, when he spoke to her, there was a different layer. Softer. More careful. One late evening, she stayed behind to finish reviewing some cultural presentation materials. The office was nearly empty, except for the cleaning crew down the hall and the soft hum of city traffic far below. She wandered into the small break room near the back of the executive floor. The corner stood a black grand piano, polished to a mirror shine. She wasn't sure why it was there. Maybe just decoration, or maybe someone had once used it during parties or private events. She hesitated, then sat down. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, uncertain. But muscle memory took over. She played something soft, something her mother used to hum while preparing tea on rainy afternoons. The notes floated through the still office like whispered memories. She didn't hear the door open. Alexander stood by the entrance, frozen in place. He didn't say a word. The sound of the music hit him in a place he didn't know existed. It was simple, clear, almost haunting. He watched her back, her fingers, the way her head tilted slightly as she played. When the last note faded, she turned and saw him. She gasped slightly and stood. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was still here." He walked slowly into the room, his eyes still on the piano. "That was beautiful." She swallowed, flustered. "It's just something my mother used to play. I haven't touched a piano in years." "You should," he said, his voice lower than usual. "It suits you." She blushed and looked down. There was a silence between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was full, like something had been said without words. "I didn't know you could play," he added. "There's a lot you don't know about me," she replied, then bit her lip, surprised by her own boldness. He looked at her, really looked, and something flickered in his eyes. Admiration. Curiosity. Maybe more. She cleared her throat. "I should get back to my desk." But before she could step past him, he gently touched her wrist. "You don't have to keep proving yourself, Mei Lin," he said. "You already have." Her breath caught. His words warmed her in a way she couldn't explain. She nodded quickly and left the room before she did something foolish, like cry or smile too much or ask him why he looked at her like that. Over the next few days, something shifted between them. He wasn't just her boss anymore. He brought her coffee when she looked tired. He asked if she'd eaten lunch. He sent her articles about music and old Chinese poetry. Once he leaned over her desk to show her a graph and didn't move away quickly, and neither did she. Felt like something unspoken lived in that space between them now. Something fragile and growing. But nothing good stays untouched for long. The storm came on a Wednesday afternoon. Mei Lin was at her desk, reviewing notes for the investor dinner. The doors to the executive elevator opened behind her, and she heard sharp heels click against the marble floor. A woman's voice, elegant, cool, and unmistakably confident, echoed through the hallway. "Where is Alex?" Mei Lin turned slightly. The woman was tall, dressed in designer black, with perfect red lips and piercing green eyes. Her coat swung off one shoulder like she had just walked out of a fashion magazine. Her gaze landed on Mei Lin and narrowed. "Who are you?" I work here," Mei Lin said quietly. "Alexander is in a meeting. I'll wait." The woman didn't smile. She looked her up and down, then walked past her desk like she didn't exist. Mei Lin sat frozen, heart pounding. Whoever she was, she clearly wasn't just a colleague. A moment later, Alexander stepped out of his office, surprised. "Claire." The woman walked straight to him and kissed him on the cheek. "Back early," she said. "Thought I'd surprise you." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You did." She glanced over his shoulder at Mei Lin, then back at him. Who's she? This is Mei Lin, Alexander said evenly. She's helping us with the China project. Interesting, Claire said, her tone sharp. She's very unexpected. Mei Lin stood quickly. I should go. But before she could walk away, Claire turned to her again. Tell me, she said. Are you here for translation or something else? Alexander's jaw tensed. Claire, I'm just curious, she said, flashing a tight smile. Mei Lin didn't respond. She simply nodded and walked away, her face burning. Behind her, she heard Claire laugh softly. You've changed, Alex. I wonder why. Mei Lin rode the elevator down alone, her hands trembling. She had felt like she was beginning to belong in Alexander's world. But that woman's words, that cold stare, reminded her of the truth. She wasn't part of his world. She had only been invited into it. And maybe, just maybe, that invitation was about to expire. The air in the office had changed. Mei Lin felt it every time she walked past Alexander's door. He still greeted her, still sent small notes on her work, but something had closed between them. A curtain drawn. Since Claire's return, the lightness that had slowly grown in their conversations had vanished. In its place was silence. Measured words. Careful distance. Claire had not left town. Instead, she began visiting the office often. Not officially, not as a partner or consultant, just as someone who felt entitled to be there. She would sweep in with designer bags and iced coffee, laugh loudly in Alexander's office, and walk past Mei Lin like she wasn't there. One afternoon, Claire stopped beside Mei Lin's desk while waiting for Alexander. Still here, she said, tilting her head. Yes, Mei Lin replied softly, keeping her eyes on her computer screen. Claire leaned closer, her voice low. You know, these things usually don't last. He likes his projects neat. Organized. Over when the job's done. Mei Lin looked up, confused. Claire smiled. You're smart. You can put the pieces together. Mei Lin didn't answer. Her fingers curled slightly on the mouse, her heart stinging. Claire walked away, satisfied, just as Alexander exited his office. He barely glanced at Mei Lin, then disappeared with Claire into a meeting room. Later that evening, Mei Lin sat alone in the break room, staring out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. Need your notes on the investor event tomorrow. Email is fine. That was all. No warmth. No thank you. No mention of the music she'd played, the smiles they'd shared, or the way he used to look at her like she mattered more than anyone else in the room. She closed her eyes. He hadn't defended her. Not once. When Claire looked at her like she was a stain. When she made those cutting remarks. Alexander had said nothing. He hadn't explained. He hadn't pushed Claire back. And maybe he didn't need to. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe Mei Lin was just a temporary part of a temporary deal. That night, she drafted a letter. Took her hours to find the right words. Simple. Honest. Professional. She didn't sleep. The next morning, she placed the envelope on his assistant's desk with a quiet request to give it to Alexander. She gathered her things, just a small notebook, a pen, and her worn coat, and walked out of the building. No one stopped her. No one noticed. Except him. Alexander arrived later than usual that morning. Claire was already in his office, talking about some gala they had to attend. His assistant handed him the envelope without comment. He opened it, thinking it was some minor document. But when he read the first line, everything stilled. To Mr. Reed. Thank you for the opportunity. I've learned a great deal. I believe my time here has reached its natural end. He dropped the letter. Where is Mei Lin? He asked sharply. His assistant looked confused. She left about 20 minutes ago. She said she was finished. Finished? He repeated, his voice rising. Claire looked up from her phone. You mean the translator girl? He turned toward her. Don't call her that. Claire's eyebrows lifted. Excuse me. He didn't answer. He walked out of the room and called her cell. No answer. He sent a message. No reply. He tried her old email, the one she'd used at the hotel. Nothing bounced back, but there was no response either. He went to her desk. Empty. The drawer still had a paperclip and a sticky note she'd once doodled on, a small sketch of a bird. He sat in her chair for a moment, staring at the wall. She was gone. And it felt wrong. Not just inconvenient. Not just sudden. Wrong. The day dragged on, but he wasn't present. His staff noticed, but no one dared ask. He ignored Claire's questions, ignored his schedule, ignored everything except the silence she left behind. That evening, he stood by the piano, the place where he'd first seen her differently. Keys were untouched. The room felt colder. He tried to remember the last real thing she'd said to him. The last moment her eyes met his without fear. And he couldn't, because he hadn't been paying attention. Not when she needed it most. 3 days passed. No word. He contacted the hotel where she used to work. The manager said she'd quit weeks ago. He reached out to the cultural center they had once spoken about visiting together. They hadn't seen her. He even sent a quiet message to someone in HR, asking if she'd mentioned future plans. Nothing. She had vanished. Mei Lin, meanwhile, had found her way back to the shadows. She now worked at a smaller hotel in Queens. It wasn't as polished, but it was quieter. Less glamorous, less cold. The manager had recognized her immediately when she applied, pleased to have someone with experience. He didn't ask questions about why she left a job with a global company. She cleaned rooms again, changed sheets, folded towels. It was hard, but it was familiar. No cold stares, no beautiful women whispering cruel things, no glass walls that made her feel like a butterfly pinned on display. But it wasn't the same. Every time she walked past a mirror, she saw a different version of herself. Not the confident woman who had stood beside Alexander during investor meetings. Not the woman who had once played music in a room full of silence. Just the old version. Quiet. Invisible. But the worst part was the dreams. The dreams of him looking for her. Reaching out. Saying the things he never said when she was there. And every time she woke up, her heart ached because it wasn't real. One evening, as she walked home from work, a light drizzle began to fall. She pulled her coat tighter and crossed a quiet street. A taxi drove by, splashing a puddle near her feet. She didn't react. She stopped at a small bakery and bought a roll, something warm to hold in her hands. Behind her, someone stepped in. She turned instinctively, but it wasn't him. Course it wasn't. She took her bread and left. Alexander sat in his office, staring out at the city. His phone lay on the table. No messages. The light on his desk blinked. A new deal. A new deadline. None of it mattered. He had read her resignation note 10 times. Maybe more. Every word polite. Controlled. And yet between the lines he saw the truth. She had left because she believed he didn't care. Because he hadn't spoken. Because he had stood silent when she needed him to stand beside her. Closed his eyes. He remembered the first time he heard her speak Mandarin. The music she played. The soft way she looked at the world. The strength beneath her shyness. And now she was gone. And he didn't know how to reach her. 'Cause he had never asked where she came from. He only knew that without her, his world felt wrong. Incomplete. He stood suddenly, grabbed his coat and walked out into the night. He didn't have a plan. He only had one thought repeating over and over. Find her. Before it's too late. The morning after Alexander decided to find Mei Lin, he canceled his meetings without explanation. His staff stared, confused. Claire sent him 3 messages asking what was going on. He didn't answer. He walked out of his building with no driver, no assistant, and no plan, only her name written in his heart like a compass. He started at the old hotel where they had first met. The manager there remembered her instantly and offered a warm smile. She was one of the best, he said. Quiet, respectful, always stayed late if we needed her. Shame she left. Do you know where she went? Alexander asked. The manager shook his head. No, but she asked for her old payslips when she resigned. She said she might need proof of experience. Maybe she applied somewhere else in hospitality. Alexander thanked him and left. It wasn't much, but it gave him an idea. He made a list of every hotel in the city that might hire someone like her. Not 5-star places, but smaller ones. Quiet ones. Kind where someone could disappear without being noticed. He visited 5 hotels that day. No luck. But at the 6th, a small, modest hotel in Queens, the receptionist said, Mei Lin? Yes, she works here. Cleaning team. Afternoon shift. Alexander felt his heart jolt. He wanted to run up the stairs, find her, hold her. But he stopped himself. She had left because he hadn't seen her clearly before. If he wanted her to see him now, he needed to come not as her old boss, not as the CEO of anything, but as a man who had made a mistake and wanted to make it right. He asked to speak to her but was told she wouldn't be in for another 2 hours. He left his name and walked outside, his hands shaking slightly. 2 hours felt like a lifetime. Meanwhile, Mei Lin stood in her small apartment, folding her uniform. She didn't know why, but her heart felt heavy today. The kind of heavy that doesn't come from tired legs or hard work, but from something missing inside. She had done her best to move on. To forget the man who had once made her feel seen, only to fall silent when it mattered most. She had tried to hate him. She had replayed every moment he stood next to Claire and said nothing. Every time he turned away instead of stepping closer. But her heart refused to listen. She still remembered the way he looked at her while she played piano. The way he once brought her tea when she had a cold. The way he trusted her with words, with meaning, with silence. Maybe that was love. Or maybe it was just loneliness wrapped in hope. Either way, it had changed her. She looked in the mirror, brushing her hair. She saw someone different now. Not just the cleaner. Not the translator. A woman who had stood in boardrooms. Who had spoken with power. Who had walked away when she needed to protect her heart. That thought gave her strength. Even if she still missed him. When she arrived at work, she didn't see him right away. She stepped into the small staff area, tied her apron, and greeted the other workers. The same old routine. Same old smell of fresh linen and cleaning spray. But when she stepped into the hallway with her cart, she froze. He was standing near the lobby. Her heart jumped to her throat. He looked different. No suit. No tie. Just jeans and a coat. His hair was a little messy from the wind. But his eyes, those eyes, were the same. Searching. Wide. Vulnerable. She stood still. So did he. Neither spoke. Then slowly, he walked toward her. I've been looking for you, he said. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her cart. I didn't expect you to, she said softly. He nodded once. I wouldn't have expected me either. She looked away toward the window. Why are you here? Because I need to say what I didn't say before. She didn't move. You left, he continued. And I didn't realize how much you mattered until the silence swallowed everything. The piano. The meetings. Even the hallway outside my office. It's all empty without you. Mei Lin's throat tightened. You didn't stop her. When she said those things. When she looked at me like I was less than nothing. I know, he whispered. And I hate myself for it. I was afraid. I thought staying quiet would protect you, or the company, or the illusion I had control. But I heard you instead. She closed her eyes. Yes, I miss you, he said. Not because of what you did for my company, but because of who you are. Your music. Your quiet strength. The way you see things no one else does. Mei Lin finally turned to him. Her face was calm, but her eyes held storms. If I was just a maid, would you still be standing here? Yes, he said without hesitation. I'm standing here because I'm not a CEO right now. I'm just a man who let go of something precious and wants one more chance to hold it again. There was silence again. She didn't answer. He stepped closer. Will you let me try again? She looked at him long and hard. He didn't look away. I'll only consider it, she said, if you answer one question honestly. Anything, he said. Did you ever feel ashamed of me? His face broke slightly, as if the question cracked something inside. No, he said. Not for 1 second. I felt unworthy of you. And afraid. Not ashamed. She stared at him, trying to read the truth in his voice. Then slowly, she nodded. Good, she said. Because I'm not ashamed of who I am. Not anymore. He smiled, a small, hopeful smile. She didn't smile back. Not yet. But she didn't walk away either. And for Alexander, that was enough. For now. The wind was cold that morning, but the sky was clear. Mei Lin sat alone on a wooden bench near the edge of a small park. Trees were bare, and the ground was covered in soft white snow. Her fingers were tucked inside her sleeves, and her breath came out in small clouds. She looked peaceful, but her heart was not quiet. Not yet. Behind her, slow footsteps crunched in the snow. She didn't turn. She knew it was him. Alexander stopped a few feet away and waited. She let him. For a moment, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft but steady. I need to know something before I can move forward. He nodded, though she still didn't look at him. Was I just useful to you, or did I matter? The words lingered in the air between them like snowflakes frozen in time. Alexander stepped closer. He sat beside her, not too close, careful not to touch her hand or break the silence too soon. He looked ahead at the frozen trees. Then he turned to her. And then, slowly and clearly, he spoke in Mandarin. Mei Lin turned to him sharply, surprised. He repeated, softer this time. You are my heart's peace. Her eyes filled suddenly with tears. Not because the words were poetic, but because she heard the truth in them. Simple. Honest. No performance, no defense. Just truth. He went on, still speaking gently, still in Mandarin. You were never just useful. From the moment I heard your voice outside my suite, I noticed you. Not because you could translate or organize papers. 'Cause your voice was calm when the world was loud. 'Cause you made silence feel safe. Because I saw in your eyes a world I didn't know I was missing. Her lip trembled. She looked down, trying to breathe through the wave of emotion. I didn't say it before, he continued, now switching back to English, because I didn't know how. I've spent so long hiding behind work and numbers and rules. But you made me want to stop running. You made me want to stand still. She closed her eyes. You matter, he said. More than any deal. More than any title. You matter to me. A tear fell down her cheek, and she wiped it with the back of her hand. I left because I thought I had no place in your world, she said quietly. That someone like me would only be temporary. Replaceable. You're not. I used to believe that love should be quiet, she said, like my mother's music, like my father's books. But now I think love should speak. Should protect. It should choose you when you can't choose yourself. He nodded slowly. I didn't speak when I should have. I didn't protect you. And I'm sorry. Another pause. I'm not asking you to forget, he said. Only to let me try again. Not as your boss. not even as someone who knows all the answers, just as a man who wants to learn how to love better. She finally looked at him fully, her face soft with sadness but also with something new, something opening. "I'll give us a chance," she said. His breath caught. She added quickly, but not because of the words, because of the silence that followed. "You didn't try to explain it away. You just told the truth." He smiled, slow and full of feeling. "No more hiding." She gave a small nod. They stood together then and began walking slowly through the snow-covered path. Side by side. No rush. "I want to offer you something," he said after a while. "I'm not coming back as your employee," she warned gently. He laughed. "I know. That's not what I meant." She looked at him curiously. "I have a new project. It's a cultural exchange program, connecting young tech minds between the US and China. It's more than business, it's personal. I wanted to build understanding. Music, language, history, not just numbers." She tilted her head, listening. "I want you to lead it with me," he said. "Not because I owe you. Not because I'm trying to win you. But because I can't imagine doing it without you." She stopped walking. "You really mean that?" "I do." She stared at him, searching again for anything false. But his face was open, his voice steady. And for once, the world didn't feel so cold. "Then yes," she said. "I'll do it. As your partner." His smile grew. They walked again, this time closer. He didn't take her hand, but their shoulders brushed lightly now and then. By the time they reached the edge of the park, snow had started falling again. Soft and slow, like feathers from the sky. They stood under a bare tree, quiet. Alexander looked at her, then reached out and gently brushed a snowflake from her hair. "May I kiss you?" he asked. Mei Lin's cheeks flushed pink. She didn't answer right away. But then she stood on her toes, closed the small space between them, and kissed him first. It was not a loud kiss. Not movie perfect. Just two people who had been quiet too long, finally speaking with their hearts. When they pulled apart, she smiled, really smiled, and he felt something in him settle for the first time in years. Then her phone rang. She glanced at it. Her sister's name flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then looked at him. He smiled and nodded. "This time," she answered. And as she spoke in Mandarin, her voice calm and light, he stood beside her in the snow. Not behind. Not above. Beside. Where he planned to stay.